Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. It has been an extraordinary night of breaking news in Virginia, where the second most powerful Republican in the House, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor, has lost his primary election by double digits. Not a close loss. He got drummed out. And he got drummed out by Tea Party challenger David Brat. An astonishing upset, not least because Cantor's own internal polling, according to the campaign just a little while ago, showed him with a 34-point lead last month. Cantor outraised his opponent by, listen to this margin, 26-1. The Associated Press called the race for Dave Brat just after 8 p.m. Eastern time, just a little more than an hour after polls closed. This was not a squeaker. And Eric Cantor had to come out before the cameras and the microphone with his wife and concede the race 20 minutes after that call.
Thank you. Thank you. Look, obviously, we came up short. Serving as a 7th District congressman and then having the privilege to be majority leader has been one of the highest honors of my life. I know there's a lot of long faces here tonight, and it's disappointing, sure. But I believe in this country. I believe there's opportunity around the next corner for all of us.
As for the next Republican nominee for Virginia's 7th District, Dave Brat, tonight, he said the people have spoken.
I think the people are just ready for some major changes in this country. And I was blessed. I mean, it's a miracle. What do I attribute to? First of all, I attribute it to God, and I'm utterly humbled and thankful I'm a believer, and so I'm humbled that God gave us this win. But right with that, God acts through people, and God acted through the people on my behalf.
That was Brat, who is now the nominee in the Republican Party for the 7th District, having upset House Majority Leader Eric Cantor. Now, Brat ran a conservative platform, pro-gun, anti-Obamacare, pro-balanced budget. The big issue in the contest between Majority Leader Cantor and Dave Brat was immigration. This was the scene outside of Cantor's headquarters tonight. A crowd of people chanting for immigration reform, protesting Cantor's obstruction of immigration reform, and wearing Casa de Virginia buttons. Now, throughout the campaign, Dave Brat accused Eric Cantor, who, again, had been part of the obstructionist wing of the Republican caucus, he accused him of being soft on immigration and supporting amnesty. He also laid the responsibility for the current immigration crisis in Arizona and Texas, where hundreds of undocumented families and unaccompanied minors have been caught crossing the border, on both President Obama and Eric Cantor.
If you incentivize more people, Drudge, it's at the top of the Drudge news story right now. Right. 100,000 kids, and the kids themselves have said, we heard there's a Kids Act. Well, Eric Cantor is the author of the Kids Act. And so if you want open borders, vote for Eric Cantor because he's opening the borders. And I'm an economist, right? So this isn't theoretical. Look at the data. The kids are coming across the borders, and it's a humanitarian crisis. So I don't know how much simpler I can make it for the voter, but that's what's going on.
All right, for the next hour, we will cover this story from every angle, from the ramifications of the Republican Party to what it means for the future of immigration reform, to what Brat's victory tells us about the strength of the Tea Party, to the amazing story about the college that David Brat is from and the fact that he will be facing off in this election in the fall against another faculty member from that small college in Virginia. It's a big night there. We begin tonight with the political fallout from House Majority Leader's stunning defeat. Joining me now, Howard Fineman, MSNBC political analyst and editorial director of the Huffington Post Media Group, Christina Bellantoni, editor-in-chief of Roll Call. Well, Howard, the old sports cliche, that's why they play the game.
That's why they play the game. A truly remarkable night, a truly remarkable result. Eric Cantor, a man who helped create the Tea Party movement, in a sense, in Congress, who was the master of saying no, of just saying no, thought that he could ride the wave that he had helped create, and instead it drowned him tonight, because he ultimately didn't realize, I think, that the Tea Party people that he helped empower would not be amenable to the kind of insider politics that he ended up then trying to play. And instead of going along with him on that, they became increasingly angry with him on that, and they turned him out for not being a pure enough representative of the movement that he helped create.
Howard's point here, Christina, is really important because in the drama of the post-Tea Party Congress, the Congress elected in 2010, Eric Cantor has played this role as the right flank of Boehner. He's always challenging Boehner from the right. People think he's been subverting Boehner from the right. He's got a 95% lifetime rating for the American Conservative Union. I mean, this is a guy who was seen as essentially at the top of the House leadership. He was the kind of rightmost person at the very top. And that was not right enough, apparently, for the primary voters in the 7th District.
Sure. And in the story we just put to bed that's going to be on the roll call front page tomorrow, we pointed out that Cantor really started this push against President Barack Obama in very early 2009 when he and a bunch of other Republicans went to the White House to talk about the economic stimulus, and Barack Obama kind of challenged them. He was seen as sort of the first person really sticking his thumb in the president's eye. But he also... This gets at the whole story of how the caucus is changing in Congress right now. You've got more conservative Republicans than you ever had before. I mean, Cantor is still viewed by many as establishment, moderate, pick your word for it. And he also was always trying to push the party toward ideas. I mean, that's why you heard him talk about charter schools and the Family Research Act that he championed for this girl who died from his state last year. I mean, this is someone who really wanted to push the party in a different direction. And still is very conservative.
Chris, he committed 3 acts of apostasy here against the movement that he helped generate. Number 1, he refused to rule out the possibility of immigration reform of some kind.
Even though behind the scenes he basically slow-walked it, and I know immigration advocates on the Hill. Eric Cantor was not their ally.
I know, but he wasn't pure enough and unequivocal enough in public, whatever he was trying to do behind the scenes. Second, he voted ultimately to raise the debt ceiling in a complex deal. Strike number 2. Strike number 3, after posturing and beating his chest along with a lot of other Republicans, he ultimately voted to end the government shutdown. And again, these are the 3 things that the college professor from Randolph-Macon crammed down his throat day after day after day.
Here's the other thing, I think, before we read too much into we'll talk about the Tea Party, we'll talk about immigration reform. There's 2 people who I follow on Twitter. One's a GOP strategist named Rick Wilson. Another is a very sort of left organizer in Chicago who organized against the criminal justice system, and both of them made the same point. These are people opposite the political spectrum, said organizing, grassroots. Eric Cantor was not in the district today.
Right.
On the day of the election.
Well, his pollster told him he was going to win by 34 points.
Right.
You know.
Christina.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I mean, they were talking to people. They had no indication that this was even going to be an issue. I mean, he didn't really run a campaign against this guy. The last minute you saw him put out some anti-immigration mailers saying he was the one stopping Barack Obama's amnesty. So this was something that they only woke up to at the last minute. And we have a consultant who told Roll Call that basically they thought at the very worst, this might hurt his chances for someday running for the speakership. Not that he could ever possibly.
Well, all right, I want to bring in Congressman Jim Moran, a Democrat from Virginia. He's a veteran of Virginia politics. And Congressman, what's your reaction? You shaking your head tonight?
Well, you could knock me over with a feather. Obviously shocked, as all of us are. We did not see this coming. It is going to mean a real shakeup in the Republican Party. I don't think that in the short term it's in the country's interest. In the long term, it's probably going to help the Democrats. But unless Paul Ryan steps into the leadership race, then I would think Jeb Hensarling would make the move. And that will push the Republican caucus further to the right. Hensarling is far more hardcore than Eric is. Eric got bitten because there are certain times when, as majority leader, you have to show some statesmanship, and he did that, and that's why these folks defeated him. I don't think that in a normal election he would have lost, but they do say there were about 60,000 people voting in that primary, and in our 8th district primary it was half that.
Yeah, Congressman, you make a really good point here. I mean, this was not a fluke election. This wasn't by primary standards, this was not a low turnout election. This was not a squeaker, like I said at the top of the show. This was also not an example in open primaries in which Democrats can vote. Based on the early looks at the precincts, this was not Democrats voting for Eric Cantor, as far as we can tell, Howard Fineman.
Can I make a quick point?
Yes.
Apparently he lost Henrico County which is the Richmond area congressman. He lost by 7 points, even in the most urban and suburban part. Now, his district had been redrawn to include more rural areas, but he even lost Richmond, which to me indicates a Republican Party in Virginia that has moved way to the right.
Congressman,
I agree with you, Howard, and I do think this plays a bit into the Medicaid issue that Governor McAuliffe is fighting over. Much of that Medicaid issue is related to the fear that a lot of new immigrants are going to be able to take advantage of that, of Medicaid funding. We've got an enormous divide here. Of course, to some extent, Eric did this a bit to himself. He wanted as conservative a district as possible, which he interpreted to be as safe as possible. And boy, it came right around and bit him.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Congressman Cantor was presumably in communication with the House Republicans as they drew those districts. He probably had a sense of what those numbers looked like. He got himself.
Oh, he had a major role. Clearly.
Yes, he had a major role, and he got himself.
That's a gerrymandered district.
Yeah, it's a very gerrymandered district. Christina, sorry, you wanted to say something earlier.
Well, the entire thing just gets at not just the importance of organizing, but the importance of being prepared in a campaign, because when you're caught by surprise, that's when it's an issue. And then the issue of when not that many people are paying attention. It was big turnout, but it's the most activated and angry people that show up. And so this is, of course, why we're watching what's happening in Mississippi. We're going to have a runoff campaign there. State Senator Chris McDaniel thinks he has a very good chance to topple longtime Senator Thad Cochran. And this is a race that we're watching really closely, because in a runoff, you have even fewer people turning out.
And Chris McDaniel was out with a fundraising email to his supporters within a very short while after Eric Cantor's defeat tonight.
Chris, can I also say, I know Virginia well. I've covered many races there. And right now, I don't think there's any more politically schizophrenic state. And there are a lot of states competing for that title. But you've got the Northern Virginia, Washington suburbs, which are increasingly trending Democrat, pro-Obama,
strongly so,
all kinds of social issues. And then you've got a Republican Party in Virginia that is becoming more conservative, more estranged from the Washington power structure. Eric Cantor was seen as a guy who was too willing to be cozy with and comfortable in Washington. That was indicated tonight by the fact that he wasn't even in the district. Wasn't even in the district.
Congressman, does that as a member of the Virginia delegation, does that sound right to you?
Oh, Howard is absolutely right. I will mention something else. I suspect Virginia is the most weakened state as a result of this year's elections. Frank Wolf leaving appropriations and now losing the majority leader. And, I mean, to a lesser extent, my leaving appropriations on the Democratic side. Virginia has been blessed in the past with having a grossly disproportionate amount of federal grants and contracts. So from a parochial standpoint, I think the people of Virginia are going to start feeling this very soon. And I doubt that Eric's constituency has any idea of the kind of power they just gave away.
Well, but the big question to me is whether, I mean, and this is an honest question, I mean, how does Cantor carry on as majority leader for the next however many months? I mean, the guy's just basically a walking corpse on Capitol Hill. That's a position in which you have to bring the hammer down on people. You need to keep people in line. You do a lot of fundraising. You're a disciplinarian. You whip votes. You bring the caucus. I mean, it's just impossible for me to imagine how the guy plays any of those roles, having been so thoroughly politically humiliated in front of everyone.
Well, I'm sure he hasn't focused on it quite yet, Chris, but my guess is he's going to try to position somebody who is more moderate than Jeb Hensarling and the Tea Party types who defeated him. The only one I can think of is Ryan, who could beat the Tea Party leadership like Hensarling and Jim Jordan and a whole bunch of others. I can think of a lot of Tea Party people who would like that leadership position, but not a whole lot of moderates.
Christina,
if Tom Cole ran, that might be a possibility. But now, figuring out who's going to have John Boehner's back, it's going to be very difficult to get somebody in there. So I'm not sure how much longer John's going to last.
Yeah, Christina, Ezra Klein quipped that John Boehner's having an emotionally complicated evening tonight, which I thought was pretty on the money. Well, he had a very fraught relationship with Cantor in lots of ways.
Yeah, he did. And in fact, we had a roll call reporter waiting for him outside of his dinner at Capitol Hill just a few minutes ago. We're publishing a post. He wouldn't comment about it, but you've got to bet that a lot of these Republican, leaders, but also Cantor's deputies, they've got to be on the phone right now. They've got to be trying to figure out a strategy because this race starts right now, and it has consequences for John Boehner. It has consequences for everyone. And so the question I was actually going to ask the congressman is if he thinks that Cantor even sticks around, or do you just sort of step aside at this point and say, I'm going to resign because you can't be effective in the last 5 months of essentially a lame duck term?
I don't think he's going to want to put this guy Brat in and give him any preferences for seniority, even within his own class. I kind of hope that Eric does stick around, but it's in the long run, this is going to help the Democrats because I think the Republicans are going to overreach, and so we may be looking at a wave election in 2016, not in 2014. But this has implications for the Democrats, obviously, just as it does internally for the Republicans.
Congressman Jim Moran, spoken like a true veteran of Congress with his eye on the ball about seniority. Christina Bellantoni from Roll Call, thank you both. Howard Fineman's going to stay with us. Lots more after this break.